Hi, dancers. I'm so excited to have you here. I have Kirsten Kemp joining me, and the two of us, as we know, can just chit chat for hours.
Yes.
But I asked Kirsten to do a video with me because, especially this year, I have become increasingly aware that my mental state and that of my dancers really ties into how our physical performance happens. What do we have good days or bad days? Are we reaching our goals? I know personally this is something I've been aware of for a long time and tried my very best to make the most out of it. But as we come into these last few years, I know that there are tools and things that are more accessible than what I have and can provide for my dancers at this point. And as I went through an injury this last year, coming out of surgery, I really saw the highs and the lows of how my mental state that year affected my training, affected my pain level, and pretty much carried me through week to week, depending on the high or the low. So,
Hmm.
this is something that I see all the time with my dancers, especially as we get into more competitive seasons or we have the lows of life that just happen for us. And I would love to have you share a little bit of insight and probably some really great tips to help all of us as we do experience what that physical side of our mental state can be.
Oh, I'm here for it. And I have so much compassion for the whole surgery experience. I mean, just the injury experience in general. That was personally one of the huge catalysts in my personal journey to also realize, like, oh my gosh, my mind is so powerful. And I saw it either helping or hindering my recovery process. And then, of course, it got me curious, like, well, then how much is my mind affecting my performance, even when I'm not injured and all good to go? But yeah, I totally empathize with how like emotionally distressing an injury can be, and you
Yeah,
can have
it
all
is.
sorts of
And
mind games happening.
so many mind games. And it's hard sometimes to get yourself out of those just with, I'm going to say traditional, like just grit and bear it, get out of it, change, be positive. Like there's all these things that we hear, and I feel like the word mental toughness comes to mind. And it's like, just be mentally tough and grin and bear it, get through it. And that does not always, in fact, most of the time, isn't actually what ends up happening when I think about it. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear what you have to say about this. Um, I as we go into this topic, I feel like the big general question that we could dive into many different aspects of
Mhm.
is, how do you think that our mental state either affects, for good or bad, our performance or how we perform
Mhm.
inside of the studio?
Yeah, and it's such a good question because I think it invites us to kind of challenge what we think the relationship is between our minds and our bodies. And oftentimes we can kind of treat it like those are two separate things that happen to exist within the same physical person. Like, oh, what my mind is doing has nothing to do with my physical performance or the way I'm physically feeling or the injury I'm trying to recover from, or vice versa. Sometimes we can be like, man, if I just looked better, if I just performed better, then I would feel so much better. The quality of my thoughts would be more positive. And I think it's so important to start to demystify, like, what is the relationship between the two? So I will say, of course, I won't be able to give like a full hour-long lecture on this. And I'm not even going to pretend that I'm like the ultimate expert on exactly like what happens physiologically in our thoughts and our feelings. Like my expertise is really looking at the psychological side of optimum performance. But what I have seen to be very true is that our thoughts and our feelings, which oftentimes do come from our belief systems, they do have a really big impact on um, not only the way we act and therefore the results we get, but they also have a really big impact on how we feel physically and our body language. And what is dance if not extreme body language all the
Mm-hmm.
time? Doing all the speaking for you. So what I've seen is that, for example, if a dancer, let's instead of kind of going more towards like physical health injury kind of things, I'm going to speak more to the how does our mind affect our physical performance, like you're asking. So, an example I'm thinking of is like, what if a dancer has this belief that deep down they really think I'm not good enough in some way? Maybe their justification for that is I'm not good enough because I started later than most dancers who want to have a professional career, or it's because of a physical trait they have, or an experience they had when they had a teacher and they were 12 years old and that teacher said, "You're never going to make it."
Mm.
Um, so, whatever the experience was that they had that formed that belief, or, array of experiences, if you have that belief, I'm not good enough, what will likely happen is that belief system then can turn into a whole tree of thoughts. It could turn into you looking at a teacher and noticing their facial expression and instantly assuming, oh, they're judging me or they're not happy with what I'm doing. And even that one thought, it can strike this chord of fear that you're feeling physically in class. And what happens? You feel tense. And not only do you feel tense, which then affects the quality of your movements, it also disrupts your focus because you're probably so preoccupied thinking, oh my gosh, what is the teacher thinking about me? Or is a classmate judging me too? You're also, since you're probably so preoccupied with those thoughts and feelings, you're probably getting distracted. And so you're not able to put your full focus into the motions you are making with your body and all the nuances of that. And then also, of course, like I was suggesting, the physical tension, it doesn't help you perform better. But lastly, those feelings are always going to come out in our body language, even if we're trying our best to fake it, to pretend, oh, I'm confident. What I've seen is that even when dancers are very aware of their body language, like, I don't want to look insecure, they might express body language that looks confident, like having more expansive body language. But even your eyes might be down, they might be darting around. And those are little tiny micro cues that others can pick up on that really does, even in a very subtle way, project, I don't trust me in some way, or I don't think I'm good enough in some way. So maybe you shouldn't feel that way either. There are just so many ways that a core belief like I'm not good enough can start to leak out into the way you're performing physically, the way you feel, the way others perceive you. And it kind of can just turn into this whole feedback loop where, because your thoughts and feelings are a certain way, therefore that affects your actions. Therefore, you get this feedback from others and in your results that usually confirms the belief.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just love to call out that little self-fulfilling prophecy cycle, because once we know that, my hope is to help dancers feel like that's not a condemning thing, it's actually a freeing thing. And if you were to start to acknowledge, what is it that you believe about yourself? And how is that influencing what you think about yourself, what you feel, the way you react to however your teachers are responding to you? And then how is that affecting your actions and results? Then we can actually see, oh, well, these results aren't because you're a bad dancer. They just started with something maybe going on in your mind that came from an understandable life experience you had. But guess what? We can learn from that. We can change it. We can change beliefs, thoughts, and feelings, and then start a new self-fulfilling prophecy, which could turn into looking like, you know what? I do have something to offer. I don't have to be the most perfect dancer in the room to be worth something, to provide value, to connect with at least one person. And thoughts like that, they feel so much better. They cause you
Yes,
to feel
they
grounded,
do. Yes.
relaxed. And then that can just create such a beautiful ripple effect from that place. So that's something I like to start with, like, understand that first.
It kind of reminds me when I'm working with dancers to set goals or goals for
Mhm.
myself. Kind of talking about the different types of goals. And one type of goal is having kind of like an end destination of I want to be Clara in the Nutcracker, or I want to
Mhm.
I want to win first place at this competition, whatever it is. And those tend to be our most unhelpful goals because they have so much to do with what's going on around you, not your actual performance, right? Like
Yeah.
you can be your very best self. You could have improved immensely over the year, but you have no control over what the director thinks, what type of Clara they want. You have no control over what dancer over there does. So first place is something that is not the most effective goal and drive for us when we're looking at our own goals. But something I've noticed in viewing myself is the power of my mind. So when I'm focused and I'm looking, say, in a mirror and I'm focused on like, oh, my thighs are so big, because that was the story I was told over and over, is that I was a bulky dancer, that I had big muscles. So for years, I would spend time looking in the mirror and that's all I could see. All I could see. And then I started shifting my mind just a little bit and I started looking at like different parts of alignment. And then that was what my focus became, the good and the bad. And now, as I look at myself, I kind of removed from the studio in a different light, trying to be more kind to myself and speak to myself as I would speak to anyone I work with now. It is still amazing to me that I can stand in the mirror and I can see something positive about myself. And then if I choose to, I can cycle that loop into negativity so quickly.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I swear in the mirror, my body changes. And it's like,
yes,
my mind just changed my body. It just changed what I saw. And it is like, I imagine it being like those mirrors that, you know, in the fun houses
oh my
that
gosh,
just change
yes.
how, and it's like, I did that in 10 seconds. I was able to change what I saw in the mirror. And if I can do that, it's going to change how my dancing is being presented. And on top of that, kind of going back to that goal setting mentality of I don't have control over what other people think of me. The only thing I can control is what I think of myself, or the thoughts that I'm putting into my head, or how I'm doing these things. So yes, we have standards we're working towards as dancers, but I really have no control over what the director thinks of me. I can be you fill in the questionnaire. I could be the best that director is looking for, and I still have no power over what they think. I do have power over how I think about my body, about my life, about my dancing, so that I can present myself in my best light that is possible.
You are totally right. And I know that so many dancers can relate exactly to what you just shared. Like,
Crazy.
you can look in the mirror and see everything that confirms the beliefs you have about what is wrong with you. That probably started from what other people said, like in your story. So I always like to start by acknowledging we have experiences, we all have life experiences that cause us to feel that something is true about us. And just ignoring that and saying, like, oh, think positive. Oh my gosh, that annoys me so much, because in order to change, just like if you were trying to encourage a friend, if they came to you and they were crying about something and they're so upset, and maybe your friend just went through a breakup and you're like, and they're just starting to say things like, I will never find love again, or whatever, you would not just say, hey, now stop it, think positively. No, you would want to hear them out. I think that's something that intuitively we understand with other people. It doesn't help to just like disregard their experience or the emotions they're going through before we start guiding them towards change or supporting them in that. We can't force anyone to change, obviously, but I think we get that. Acknowledgement is step one. So we can do that with ourselves. It makes so much sense that you felt that way about your body, Allie, because of what was told to you. And that doesn't mean you have to stay stuck there forever. And oftentimes when dancers seek support, it's because they are hoping that change is possible and they're at least somewhat ready to start to challenge their decisions about, like, okay, that did happen. And I felt that this thing was true about me, that I'm not good enough. I'll always be behind. I'll always look this way. I don't have the ballet body, whatever. Yes, we need to acknowledge that. But then the next step will be actually asking, like, okay, just because that felt true at one point in time does not mean that needs to continue to be the reality you recreate for yourself every time you look in the mirror, every time you talk to yourself, whatever. And the mind has so much power to really make you feel like whatever you're thinking is totally true. That's how the reticular activating system works, which I'm sure you probably know about that, but a lot of dancers don't. It's that, in very simplistic terms, it's the part of your brain that's really responsible for filtering through all the information it receives. And essentially what it tends to do is it feeds you the information that it thinks you want to know. And a lot of times what it thinks you want to know is what you already believe. And that's why we have the confirmation bias thing going on. Like, you look at the teacher's facial expression and you're like, see, they hate me. I'm not going anywhere. It's terrible. And so that's why a lot of dancers, when they start working with me, they're like, okay, I want to believe that I can trust myself as a dancer after I've messed up on stage so many times. But how do I do that? It feels so true that I can't trust myself. I'm like, I know. Let's start to understand how your mind works. Your mind is just confirm that belief through experiences, but guess what? We can create new experiences, and we can open your mind to taking in new information to start to change the story. And that's how, years later for you, Allie, you can look at yourself in the mirror and see a different story. You can be open to taking in new information. And it took a while for me too, with my own stuff. Like I used to have terrible performance anxiety, and I didn't trust myself to be able to retain choreography. I just had some really humiliating mistakes that were so like emotionally intense for me, because I got yelled at, chastised, that I believed, oh my gosh, I can't trust myself. It took me a while to be open to believing something new, but it's incredible how the mind is actually very capable of changing. If your body is flexible and you can learn how to do the splits, but you weren't born that way, like your mind is actually even more flexible than that. Yeah. So of course you can change.
Yeah. It's so amazing to me, listening to experts in many different areas of mind, neurological system, whatever we're talking about. Everybody says we don't know everything. And most experts say we know we don't even know a drop in the hat when it comes to how our brain controls our body, which I think is so fascinating that we have so much information, and these experts are saying we possibly know, like some people say 1% of what they think is possible for understanding how the brain can control the body or what the nuances are. So if the experts are saying that, then I, the layman who knows nothing about why things are happening, it kind of seems mind-blowing that just changing my thought could be changing how my performance is, what anxieties come up, my ability to do multiple pirouettes, or whatever it is. But I think that this is that time where dancers have to realize that finding an expert, finding a specialist, is the right way to go, and something that we just as a normal person don't know that much about at all. And like you said, it's not just be positive. And so many of us have been brought up, or it's just the easy thing to say. Like, oh, just be positive, think triple pirouette. And it's like,
tell yourself you can.
Sometimes, it's not that simple sometimes. Otherwise, we'd all be doing 20 pirouettes if it was just 20 pirouettes. So I don't know. I just find it really fascinating that we have this ability to actually be making such a big change in our bodies without doing any physical work.
Yeah, it's totally true. I love the study that it basically was set up in such a way where they had these women who were cleaning hotel rooms. You might have heard this before. It's cited in several books I've read. Okay, it's really, really interesting. Speaking of like the power of the mind over the body, and we don't currently understand like all of the detailed nuances of this, but science does have an idea. So essentially, these women were doing this housekeeping work in these hotels, which is quite a physically demanding job. And
Mhm.
one group was told that their work did not burn very many calories. It might have felt physically intensive, but it's really not a form of, it can't be qualified as exercise. The other group was simply told that their job is a high calorie burning job. Their heart rate after a month of just practicing that thinking, and it wasn't like, oh, they told these women to like meditate on the reality or whatever, or like
Right.
constantly think the thought. They just told them, and the women were just like, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, cool, whatever. They go about
Uh-huh.
the month, they do their job. They started checking just basic physical health measures of physical health, like heart rate. I think BMI was one of them. There were a couple of categories they checked out, and the women who were told that their job was one that caused them to burn a lot of calories had lower, I think it was either lower blood pressure or lower heart rate. I'd have to cite the study again or like read through it again. But essentially, they had also lost weight only by thinking that what they were doing was going to create that outcome for them and that it was
Yeah.
like a healthy thing for them. So, and again, they didn't do anything. They watched the way these women were working. They weren't working any harder. It's just the power of their thoughts and their expectations to
Crazy.
create that change.
It's
And I think a
crazy.
lot of us have experienced that as dancers, where I call it like the new leotard effect. Why the
Hmm.
heck is it that you wear a new leotard and you're jumping higher? Your legs feel lighter. You feel like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was this good of a dancer. It's just,
It's
you just
so
feel better.
true. It is so true. Oh my gosh. So I've really been experiencing that this year in the last few months. Again, coming back from a surgery, I haven't been dancing. And over the summer, I had a lot of teaching commitments. And I was a little hesitant about my back. But when I'm in it, man, I don't even think about it. There's things that may not look as good as they did before, but I'm not thinking about it. And I was on my standing leg. I was like whipping
Mm-hmm.
out triple pirouettes, no problem while I'm
Yes.
teaching. And then I go back to class in August, and the first class back was the worst feeling ballet class I've ever taken in my
Mm,
life. Like, I was like, why do my hip flexors feel grippy? Why can't I stand on one leg? Where is my balance? I can't even do a pirouette. I can't,
mm.
the list went on. And all I could think was, wait, I just came from 6 weeks of intense teaching where I wasn't thinking about my body. I was thinking about how confident or how I wanted to show the dancers that this was possible. I want to show you what a
Yeah,
stand looks like. I want to show you what a triple pirouette looks like. Not in a cocky way, but just in a like, I can do this. And then
yeah.
when I walked into the studio and I was focused on myself, all of a sudden went out the window. And it was like my body did not change. It was my mindset that changed from
Yeah,
when I was teaching to when I was taking a class coming back from an injury, which in my mind I had to be more careful, or I
yeah.
set limitations on myself. And I think those limitations actually hindered me way more than actually
Mm,
ended up helping me in that particular situation.
yeah. That is such a good example that I think so many of us relate to. Like when we start thinking about ourselves and personalizing what our performance means, like, or just feeling like we have certain expectations for ourselves for how we should dance in a class. What does it look like to take a good class versus just having an open mind and like showing up, enjoying the class? It
Totally.
has such a power to create the experience that you have. And one of
Yeah.
my favorite things to do is to talk to dancers who are coming back from a break. And this shows the power of our mindset and our beliefs. There is this commonly held cultural belief that if you have been off for even a few days or more than a week, that your first classes back are going to be rough.
Right.
It's going to be so bad. You're going to look like this and that and the other. I swear to you, because we go in with those expectations, what's happening? Your mind is a little confirmation bias machine. You do your first little prance at that bar and you hear your ankles click a couple extra times, or you feel like it's just a little bit harder to turn out in first position. Then it's like, see, hard class. And
Yep.
that feeling of frustration or defeat makes the next movement, it makes you anticipate that it's going to be harder than it is. And so
Yeah.
what I've done is I love to stop dancers before they go back into their season or the school year or whatever. And I just ask them, what are your expectations of what your first classes back are going to look like? And they tell me a lot of what I just said. And I just start to ask them questions like, well, what if it were easier than you thought? What would that look like? And I just get their imagination going because our imaginations are really powerful. And I essentially help them examine their expectations, set some intentions, and just go in with a different mindset, like perhaps an experimental mindset or the anticipation that it's going to be so easy to surprise yourself, and it's totally possible. Again and again and again, I've seen every dancer I've talked to come back to me and be like, I did a triple and I'm so surprised, but it was not.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yes, your mind is
So
so
great.
powerful.
I feel like everything you're saying, or what I'm really just taking away from this moment, is that just like when we don't understand maybe why our hip flexor feels grippy when we're lifting our leg, and you don't know until you figure it out, until you figure it out. Then when you figure it out, you know what to do different next time and you make the change. And I think that sometimes our mental state can feel so passive and so out of, or so, even so out of control. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
But I think it feels sometimes out of control, or like you have just something that happens and you have no control, you have no control over it. But when you know what to do when you feel your grippy hip flexor, you make the change. When you know what to do when you're walking into an intimidating situation or something that you felt has in the past had yielded a result you didn't like, or maybe it's something that you know is going to create anxiety in the past. When you know what to do, you start making the change, and that no longer becomes that grippy hip in the mental in our mental state. The leotard effect and the grippy hip effect.
You are so right. Yes, and there are simple, honestly, easy to implement solutions that can be done in a moment where maybe before you got support, it feels like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to fix all these problems in my mind. I don't know how to overcome that. And that was me too before I started to get into this work. It's like, I was just curious for myself, like, how does mental change happen? If you have performance anxiety, how do you actually overcome that? If you are constantly cracking under pressure or noticing yourself holding back in audition situations or whatever, no matter how much you tell yourself, you could do it, put yourself out there, stand in front, all that stuff. How do you actually change that? That's what got me into this work, along with a lot of other things. And what I found is there are simple things we can do that can be used by every single dancer out there to start to create that change so that you can really fulfill your potential as a dancer. So hope is out there, you guys.
Hope is there.
Hope is alive.
Yes. I know that you have put some of these things together into a program, and I also know you do one-on-one coaching, but like myself, I only have so many hours in the day, right? So you have put something together for dancers that is quite big, actually, and it covers a lot. Can you tell everyone just a little bit about that, if this piqued your interest?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, I do have individual coaching, which is really great for dancers who want that individual support. Maybe you feel like there are some things you want to work through privately around self-doubt, performance anxiety, not believing in yourself, things like that, perfectionism. But what I found is that dancers grow so well in community. And so what I put together is this program. It's called the Confident Dancer Collective. It's a group coaching program that has an online education component where you will get access to like all the tools and the frameworks that I genuinely think every dancer needs to know. Like, oh my gosh, Allie, if you and I knew this back in the day, who knows?
Different story, right?
Who knows where I would have been? I don't know. So yeah, you get that lifetime access to all this educational content that teaches you really like what are the psychological tools you need to know to build confidence, perform to your best ability consistently, to manage your mental state, and really also thrive as a person, not just like as a machine who's trying to dance really well. And then there are also group coaching calls where you get to really interact with the community, get individual coaching, in front of the group, learn from other dancers as I coach them, have group discussion. I really noticed that the first time I ran this program, it was like so encouraging to see how many dancers just felt really inspired. Like, oh my gosh, if they can change that, I can too. Or I thought I was the only one who struggled with that, and I'm not.
Totally.
So yeah,
Yes, the
enrollment
power
is
of
open
seeing
now.
other people going through the same thing. Like, oh, and
Yeah,
I didn't realize that this was not just a me thing. That is so
right.
encouraging.
It's not. It is
Yeah.
not.
Oh my gosh. Okay, awesome. Well, I'm gonna put the link below that every dancer, if you have had a thought, like my thighs are too big, I can't do this. The teacher thinks this. They're looking at me. They must be thinking wrong. If you've had any of those thoughts, anything we said today that you thought, oh yeah, I've thought that before.
Mhm.
Um, like you said, Kirsten, if we had this when we were young, oh my gosh, like honestly, I mean, I'm thinking back to when I came back from injury that was the
Mhm.
last before I stopped dancing. My mental state was bad. If I could have come with the tools that you have, I it very much could have ended up in a different situation where I could
Yeah.
have come back into a professional career, because I
Mhm.
have always said that I recognize the reason I didn't make it back into a professional career was because of my mental state. And I knew that.
Wow.
And I decided in that
Mhm.
moment, I can't do this again. So maybe I would have said, oh, I don't want to do this again. But at
Yeah.
that moment, it was, I can't bear this burden again. So if you are a dancer that is training to be professional, or you are coming to dance later in life, so many of the dancers I work with are adults who are coming at this and they're adopting all this weird mentality that we had when we were young. It's like, no, 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 no. This is a different story. You guys have the benefit of this being a different story. So this is something that I think even our older dancers could really
Oh
benefit from
yeah.
if you are being serious about staying in the studio and wanting to dance and be 80 in the studio and feeling good. This is a huge part of that. It's not just the physical. You also have to make your mental match that. So
Yes.
everyone check it out below. I'm so excited for them to take a look at it. And thank you so much for joining me from my car. This has been a
So
funny
fun
recording
as
on
always.
my end. Thanks everyone for joining me in my car. Long story. We'll share another time. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to work with you more and check out your program.
Thank you, Allie. And same for you guys. Dancer Strong program is legit. I've
Yeah.
referred so many people to you. So
Thank you.
thank you.